here with Michelle Jackson. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much, Jan. It is my honor and my pleasure. I appreciate being here.
You know, Michelle, you're a wife and a mother, and Mimi, grandma. That's your favorite name, right?
Yes.
And you know, as a certified life and transformational healing speaker and coach, a voiceover artist, an author of 4 self-published books. I mean, I could go on and on. You're a poet. Um, you worked with NAMI, Chicago ambassador and speaker, and a volunteer community education for Saprea, which I went to that retreat and found it to be so amazing. And when I read through your bio and I look at this extraordinary person that you have become, it was not easy what you went through, that you, as you've often described yourself, as a Christian woman who never should have gone through these experiences as a child, and yet who you have become is so inspiring and gives all of us hope. Because when I know more about your story, and as we unfold your story for our audience, they're going to realize that pretty much we can not only do hard things, but we can survive horrific things, and we can come out on the other side so so graceful. I find you so graceful, even in the way you speak. And I just want people to know that there is great hope, because you're a living example of that. And so tell us a little bit about Flipped, okay? Your book, FLPT, capital FLPT, which, if we say it all together, says flipped. Tell us how that came about. And let's go back in time after you tell us a little bit about that book that changed everything, really.
Okay. Actually, thank you again. I'm so honored to be here. It's my desire that just as I wrote the book, to impact others, to give them an example that life can sometimes be hard and we can also overcome the hard things. The book is called When She Flipped, and it's FLPT, as Jan stated, and it's an acronym for forgiveness, love, purpose, and thoughts, because those were the 4 most imperative things that I needed to execute in my life and activate in my life for me to really start the healing process. And as we know, healing is not linear. So sometimes your healing process can last your entire life. However, it doesn't define the quality of your life. It doesn't mean that because you're still in the healing, in the throes of healing, that you don't have a remarkable life. You can have a remarkable life. You can have joy in your life and still be in the middle of your healing process.
Absolutely. That's where I'm at too. I've had great joy and a lot of hope and a lot of healing. And then there's a dip in the roller coaster ride. That's what makes the up so fun and the down so exhilarating until you get to the bottom. And then you're like, oh, now we got to go back up the hill, you know? And that really is the healing journey. But when you can have hope in it, that you can have the quality of life that you want, and what you have done with so much trauma and tragedy, is just extraordinary. And we might as well go ahead and warn our audience. You've experienced, severe mental health issues, severe sexual child abuse, uh, suicide attempts. I just want to get it out there that if somebody's going to get triggered by, you also went through marriages, but here you are. And that's what we're here for, is to know how you got here. So let's go back and see where you were before the meditation and the poetry and the writing and all of the things that you have done to become the person that you are today. And you are a bridge of hope.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, my journey, I guess, began with a single mother who was a teenage mom. My mother had me when she was 16. I think she turned 17 maybe 3 months after I was born. And we know, 16, you're still a child. You're still growing up yourself. My mother was not capable of being a hands on, loving mother. She had her own trauma. She did pass away in 2016, so she can't share her story. However, my mother's life was in a way, it was a blueprint or my blueprint on what not to do. Being in a, being born to a single mother who was still trying to grow and develop on her own, she worked a lot. She had to. She was single. My father actually was in and out of my life. I don't remember him before I was 6 years old because he was also in and out of prison or jails or what have you. At 9 years old, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. At 9 years old, my favorite uncle, my absolute favorite uncle in the entire world, which was my father's brother, he molested me. And again, he was my favorite uncle. I was a very mature kid because my mother worked second shift, which was 3 to 11. I was a latchkey kid. I'd come home from school in second grade with the keys and let myself in the apartment. And I babysat my cousins at 7 or 8 years old. I know that's hard to imagine, but it's my truth. And my mother and her favorite sister would party a lot. They'd go out to the clubs and all these things. So after she'd get home, my aunt would often bring her two boys to our apartment and they'd go out. My uncle also worked 3 to 11. So when he got home from, it's a very long story. He's my father's brother. My aunt is my mother's sister. They had children. So my cousins and I have the exact same family on both sides of our family. I hope that's not confusing. So my uncle would come to their apartment and well, he would sometimes come pick them up from my mother's apartment, but often I'd babysit either at our apartment or theirs. And he molested me nonetheless. I won't go into the details. I had no clue what to do. This happened, and it initially started, oddly enough, and I really want the people, your listeners, to hear this, as ringing of the alarm to pay attention to your children and who's around your children. This was my favorite uncle. He would tickle me and then inappropriately touch me. And it escalated from there to while I'm sleeping, he would do things. And I would awaken to him doing things until finally, and I was 9 years old, I told him because I knew there was something wrong with it. He never did these things in the presence of anyone else. It was very secretive. It was in the dark places. And something in my 9-year-old brain said, tell him this. So I did. I said, if you do this again, one night I was waiting for him to come and slip into the living room while I was sleeping on the sofa, which I was not sleeping. But I jumped up as he tried to touch me because I was awake. And I said, if you do this ever again, I'm telling everyone. And that would be the last time that he would ever try to touch me. I shared it not with my aunt, who is my mother's sister. He's my father's brother. Not with my mother. I shared it with my grandmother. And maybe I didn't share right away. It was probably 9 months to a year. And after my aunt found out, she physically attacked me and told me I was lying, which that conveyed a lot of things to me. Not only did what he did, it communicated to me that my body was not my own. But after she pushed me and I hit the back of my head in the tub, well, on the tub at my grandmother's house, and she barricaded me in the bathroom, wouldn't let me out. She confronted me about what I told my grandmother. That communicated the message that not only is my body not my own as it pertains to molestation or sexual abuse, but if I speak up, I will be further punished. in that moment, I was devastated. That was bad enough, but then an additional punishment was she told me I couldn't see my cousins, who were my favorite relatives, little bitty relatives. And she kept them away from me for about a year. I didn't see them again probably from 10 to 11 years old. Speeding ahead a bit, at this time, my father is in prison because when I was 6 years old, he came back into my life, and in the middle of the night, the police were knocking down our doors trying to locate him. He had gone across the street to one of our neighbors' homes, climbed in through the little girl's bedroom. She was 12 years old, and he raped her. So he was removed well, not permanently, but for 8 years from my life, from the time that I was 6 until 14 years old. Well, I'm still with my mom, who is emotionally unavailable. She does everything she's supposed to do in the sense of provision. I'm never hungry. I'm never without clothing. I have shelter, although we moved around quite a bit from apartment to apartment. I went to 6 different grammar schools. I was always the new kid. So that all of these different things that were happening, my mother exposed me to a lot of things being a young woman, finding herself, dating a lot of men, a lot of things, a lot of issues. I had a very lonely childhood, extremely lonely. At 14, when my father was being released from prison, now while he was in prison, he would write letters, send gifts, and of course, I know now that one of his family members was actually sending the gifts on his behalf. But I remember he sent me on my 12th birthday this huge teddy bear. It was white, the cutest teddy bear ever. I was this petite little girl. The bear was as big as me, I think. It was huge and beautiful. And again, I knew he was in prison because my family talked and they didn't withhold the information. I'd heard in the neighborhood what he'd done, and that was the second time we moved. And I became the rapist's daughter. So I knew what he was in prison for. I was 12 years old in 7th grade, a really smart kid, honor roll, all these things, active. But in the back of my mind, because I felt invisible with my mother, I created this fantasy that my father, even though he'd done what he'd done, he was going to rescue me. He was going to come and wrap his arms around me and tell me, oh my gosh, Michelle, I'm so proud of you. I love you so much. Because I'm 51 years old and my mother died in 2016, and I have never heard her tell me she loved me. She never did. So I have this fantasy. At 14, he's being released from prison. He'd also done something in California. So he was, I don't know if it's called probation, parole, but he couldn't leave the state for 2 years. But when he was released, he called me. He let me know he couldn't leave the state. He would see me when I was 16. I'm so excited. And our very first conversation, I'm sitting in our apartment in the dining area with the phones that used to hang on the walls. Yes, I'm that old. Okay. And he tells me, I'm like gushing because all of my life, even though I'd hear horrible things about him, my relatives would tell me, you look just like him. You articulate just like him. You're creative just like him. However, in the next breath, he's crazy. He's insane. So it was hard for me to reconcile, what does that say about me? Some of the things that I did or the way that I thought, just the creative side of my brain and the logical side of my brain, often they would say, you're just like him. If I'm just like him, then am I crazy too? And keep in mind at this time, I'm having sleep issues. I had sleep issues as far back as I can recall. So at 16, let's go back. So 14 years old, I'm on the phone with him. And one of the first things he says after I'm gushing, I'm so happy he's out. I can't wait to see him in 2 years. Oh my gosh. He said, I just want to let you know and prepare you that I believe in incest. I'm 14. I know what incest is. I'm not being raised in the church. Again, my mother partied and she would drink and, she hung out a lot. I had never gone to church. I found a church. That's another long story. when I was 12 and started taking my cousins around the corner from our apartment, this Methodist church. We'd go by ourselves. But in terms of going to church with my family or being raised and to believe in God, the closest we came to that was this huge family Bible that my mother had that she would that sat on our cocktail table. And it actually belonged to my deceased grandfather. But saying prayers, all of that, we didn't do that. There was no church. There was none of that. So when he told me the incest thing and he starts going into, the Bible even talks about it and it's okay. And I just want to prepare you. So in my head, that's enough to make you say, whoa, maybe I shouldn't be excited about this man. Maybe I should tell someone. Instead, because I was living in this fantasy world of having a better life, I kept it a secret. And I convinced myself I have 2 years to change his mind. I have 2 years to show him how special I am, how amazing I am, how I'm so similar to him, how he's going to see me and he's not going to be able to hurt me. And I truly convinced myself of that. However, at 16, and I don't know how this skipped my mind, when I was 12 years old, I attempted suicide for the first time. That's a whole nother story. My mother was going to leave me with my alcoholic grandmother, and I was already dealing with so many other traumas. I literally didn't want to live. That was at 12. So now speeding back ahead to 16, I see him for the first time. My mother, who knew what he'd done and why he was in prison and all these things, my aunt came over to our apartment and they went out that night, the first time that I would see him since I was 6. That night, he brutally raped me. I remember getting dressed before he arrived in Chicago. It took me so long, hours and hours, to figure out what I was going to wear. Because I was like a size 14 children, maybe size 3 in adults, tiny little thing. And I'm trying to figure out, what can I put on that will not be provocative, even though I'm a child. So I don't have provocative clothing. But I didn't want him to want me. I wanted to look as innocent as possible. And it didn't matter, of course. So after the first rape by my father, soon after that, I attempted suicide for the second time. I, of course, was rushed to the hospital, all these things, stomach pumped, all the things. My third time was at 17 because he was back and forth in and out of Chicago to California, coming and going. And I didn't know why he didn't just come back to Chicago in the first place. I found out later, which would be January of 1990, 4 months, almost 4 months shy of my 18th birthday. And it was my third suicide attempt. I was being released from the hospital. My mother was going to leave me in the mental ward. She told them, I'm signing away my rights. You can have her. And she never asked me why I was attempting suicide at all, why I was trying to end my life. And my father, I found out later, called and he convinced her that if she did not sign me out of the mental ward, that he was going to do bodily harm on her. So she came and signed me out. The night that I was released from the mental ward of Michael Reese Singer Institute, my mother went out again. My father was there. And not only did he rape me that night, but he attacked me, choked me until I was unconscious, pulled a gun on me, played Russian roulette, pulled the trigger on himself twice and me twice. It escalated. It was literally like something out of a movie. And this is after I've been released from the mental ward of the hospital, after my third attempt at ending my life. And that would be the last time that I would see him, which was January of 1990, because I found out that he had been robbing banks. It was a whole news report on television. One of my friends from high school told me this particular day, Michelle, you need to watch the news tonight because I think, your father on there. And I'm like, what do you mean? She said, just watch. So the 10 o'clock news came on, and I hadn't heard from the family or anything, his family. And they had a news report that he had robbed a bank on the west side, northwest side of Chicago. And that was January 1990. So he was in federal prison from January 1990 until he was released this March of 2023.
Oh, my word. Okay, Michelle.
Which, when I found that out, in 2021, now I've done so much healing work, between 1990 and 2023, but 1990 was my third suicide attempt, but it wouldn't be my last. My final suicide attempt, I was 30 years old. At this point, I have a daughter. I had left my first husband. There was some physical violence in that marriage. There were two situations. The second one, I knew that was it. I have to go. So I left him. And it wasn't an attempt to end my life because of him or leaving him. It was more of, my life will never get any better. I will continue to make bad choices. My daughter will be better off without me. She was 9 years old, and I had a plan. I executed that plan. But the police were called because I called one of my friends, and I didn't tell her what I had done, but she heard something in my voice, and she called the police. The police kicked down my mother's door because I came back to Chicago after being in Georgia, married and all that. I returned to Chicago, and it was over for me. A lot of people say when you say you want to end your life, that suicide is not really about not living. It's more about ending the pain. Well, I was hopeless. So there was no option for me to end the pain. For me, I wanted to no longer exist. I thought pain was synonymous with my name. If I was alive, I was absolutely going to be in pain. So I didn't want to exist. And the police kicked the door in. They sat with me. I won't tell the method by which I attempted, but they sat with me until I lost consciousness. And they called the ambulance, rushed me to the hospital. I flatlined. They did CPR and chest compressions and used a defibrillator on me several times and brought me back. And when I came back, I was livid. I was not happy at all, because when I was 21, almost 22, after I'd had my daughter, I found the Lord, even though he's not lost. I was. But I started going to church, and I was faithful. I was doing all the things. I'm studying the Bible. I'm a greeter. I'm in the choir. I'm doing all the things to silence this desire to stop existing, because it lived in me every day. And it was not conditional. It wasn't based on if I had a good day or if things looked good. There was this part of me that was so broken and so dysfunctional and so hopeless that it didn't matter what was going on around me. Internally, I was at odds with myself. I felt worthless. I felt unlovable. I felt isolated all the time. I felt misunderstood. I had these dysfunctions that I could never really connect with people the way that little Michelle wanted to. I would get close and then retreat. I would always run. And so at 30, I'm flatlining. They're bringing me back, and I was angry, but there was a situation when I flatlined. I heard a voice say, "Michelle, why are you here?" I didn't see myself in the hospital, but I could hear the doctors. I heard the machine. I heard it go beep. I heard everything. It wasn't like in the movies where, when people say they have a near-death experience, they see a light. I didn't see a light, but there was the brightest illumination you've ever seen. And I was in this space. I couldn't see myself, but I knew I existed. And I'm looking around, and there's just illumination. No anything, no structures, nothing, just emptiness and illumination. And the voice said, "Why are you here?" And before I could ask, "Where is here?" the voice said, "Not yet." And immediately after that, and I'm alive again. And I was angry. God, do you want me to suffer? But from that moment, as angry as I was, that same friend that I'd called and I didn't tell what happened, but she called the police. She called the pastor whose church I was visiting at the time, and he came to visit me. They told him, no, she's in the mental ward, whatever. She's recovering, all these things. He insisted. And now, remember I told you that voice said, Michelle, why are you here? When they wheeled me into the nurse's station, which is where he was visiting me, they wheeled me up to the table. He's sitting across from me. His first words out of his mouth were, Michelle, why are you here? I start down this laundry or food list of shopping list of, well, this happened. My mother doesn't love me. My father raped me. My uncle molested me. My aunt abused me. They don't love me. Yada, yada, yada. I'm depressed. I want to die. He said, I'm not talking about why you're in this hospital. Why are you on this earth? And that was the beginning of the
Wow.
shift.
That's just giving me chills all over my body. I'm just like,
I
because
know.
honestly, to go through that domino of trauma, that just from one thing to another, it almost had to take that near death experience where you heard, there's light, illumination, you hear something, and then to
Mm-hmm.
have that to come back into the world, gasping, and I'm alive
Mm-hmm.
and I'm really angry about it. And then to have the first person
Mm-hmm.
say, why are you here? And it's not a laundry list of why do you want to die, but why are you here? I want
What is your
every
purpose?
listener to realize you have a purpose. No matter what you have been through, there is a purpose for you to be here. Oh, Michelle, you're so inspiring. Let's continue.
Jan, may I just
Yes.
interject there? You said no matter what you've been through. And I want to add a footnote here, or not a footnote, but an addition. No matter what you've been through and no matter what you've done, there are so many other details to my story because you can't have that kind of trauma and then not walk away slightly dysfunctional or grossly dysfunctional. I had 3 abortions. My daughter is my only living child. Now, no matter where you stand on the side of pro life, pro choice, doesn't matter. This is not political. But any woman facing that kind of decision, that's additional trauma. And my first abortion I had because I wasn't sure if I was pregnant by my father or my boyfriend.
How old were you?
So no matter what has happened to you or what you've done, you have a purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no question in my mind. Were you 17
Mhm.
at the time of that first?
I was
Yeah.
17, my first abortion.
How to even make a choice. You're still a child, like your mother was. And
Mm-hmm.
here it is, being raped by your own father, that you've had a fantasy that he would rescue you, that sends you the biggest teddy bear, the dream toy, that, one of those great big
Mm-hmm.
ones, you know?
Yeah. And additionally, after my mother died, now I'd done all the healing work by 2016. My uncle, the same one that molested me, later he would acknowledge what he'd done and he apologized. And me being this forgiving person, I forgave him. I didn't trust him around my daughter because I'm not an idiot, but I forgave him and we had a relationship. After my mother died, even though I was in the throes of healing, I'd done all the work. I'm having events and hosting events and pouring into women and speaking life into their pain and their places of death. When my mother died, although I had stopped speaking to her because my mother had a lot of issues, and she was a part of the reason, without blaming her because she had her own traumas. But her dysfunction caused me to be dysfunctional as well. So I had stopped speaking to her years before she died. However, when she died, it was the finality of she will never own the damage she's done to me. We will never be able to reconcile. She will never tell me she loves me. It is final. And I remember my uncle calling me. He was still alive at this point. And he said, he would call me Shell. He's like, Shell, I'm so sorry. I heard about your mother. And I know you guys had a rocky relationship, but I just wanted to make sure you knew I'm here. I said, I know you are. And we talked, and I had a meltdown. And I'm sobbing. Why didn't she love me? What's wrong with me? Now, keep in mind, I'd done all this healing work. I'd rebuilt or built my self-esteem, not even rebuilt, but built my self-esteem. I knew I had value and worth, but in that moment, I had none. She died, never validating me, never affirming my worth or my value. How could she do that? What's wrong with me? He stopped me while I'm crying. He said, there was never anything wrong with you. It was never you. What you don't know is that your father, his brother, raped her, and you were the product of that rape. So why didn't she tell me this? All this time, I'm thinking this woman hates me. She loved my daughter because I allowed her to have a relationship with my daughter. Monitored relationship, but a relationship. She could tell my daughter in a heartbeat that she loved her. Everyone knew my mother adored my daughter, Taylor. But she never told me. Well, if she had told me that, I would have understood. I would have been able to understand there's nothing wrong with me. She is in the throes of trauma. She doesn't know how to deal with her own pain. Oh my gosh, try harder, Michelle. Do something different. Approach her from this angle. Why does she never tell me? I vowed I would never die with my secrets. I vowed to use my voice. And I'd already started at that point. But after that, I was volunteering with NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I started to speak on panels. I started to help with their crisis intervention team, speaking to the police department, sharing the story about my final suicide attempt. I signed up with AFSP Illinois, that's American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I'm going to speak. I'm having events. I'm speaking on social media, sharing my story wherever, whenever, to make sure that no one feels like I felt. And that people can have the confidence, the strength to know if you keep trying, if you keep striking, eventually you can see the light. Eventually you can have hope. Eventually you can have joy. If I can do it, anybody can. If Jan can do it, anybody can. I mean, absolutely anyone.
Speaks volumes.
But knowing that,
It
I'm
speaks
sorry?
volumes to the essential piece of not only our own human um, resiliency and being able to actually foster that resiliency and grow it and make it a stronger muscle and a stronger way that we react to trials and problems and things that we go through in our life, but it just the human spirit itself. And it also speaks deeply to that generational trauma and how it is passed on, because people, they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, it's passed because you now have these issues and it's going to affect your children. Even if you're trying really hard not to, you're not abusing them directly, you're going to go through marriages, substance use or abuse. Things are going to happen because until you heal and you find the way out of that trauma of sexual assault and abuse and violence, especially for children, tweens, teens, young adults, it is so interruptive of our natural development, our natural confidence. When they talk about arrested development, we are talking about not developing past these things because you're in an altered state, and you are remarkable for having gone through this and being at the point you were to even make a choice at 17, because you don't know. That's why we just cannot judge anyone. We absolutely don't know where someone is coming from, what they're dealing with. You don't even have the mind to deal with something so difficult, so incredibly, horrifically, in my book, the worst thing, to have it be your parent. It just it just makes me it just makes me weep all over inside my body for you.
Jan, may I read something quickly? I know this is your podcast, but you said something. My prayer was that this conversation would help others, right? I'm sure you have the same desire. And also, I asked God to make sure that we were in sync. You just said something, and I'll read this to you. Outwardly, I seemed confident as if I had the answers. Yet on the inside, I was a timid, frightened child who never had the opportunity to mature. I suffered from arrested development, stuck at the precipice of pain. I ceased to emotionally mature the day I was emotionally and physically violated for the first time. There's so much more to that, but as soon as you said the arrested development, that's that in sync thing, because it's the truth. We get stuck at the moment of violation. And we know that that's partially because of how the brain chemistry is shifted and changed, but we get stuck there. So when we make these decisions and we're choosing the wrong partners and we're jumping in and out of beds or drinking or smoking or doing drugs or whatever our addiction of choice is, or it's not really even a choice, right? You kind of feel pushed into it like there's no other choice. For me, to this day, I don't drink. I was around alcoholics most of my life, and it was such an ugly thing to me. So I was never dealing with alcoholism. I've never been a drinker. I've never done drugs. But my addiction was to hopelessness. It was literally to hopelessness. And what do you do when you're hopeless? You give up.
Right. There's nowhere to go. It's apathy, it's despair at its very, very lowest tone. And there is no.
And so I became the expert of masking. How are you, Michelle? I'm fine, thanks. How are you? Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. I could turn it on in a heartbeat. And I was dying on the inside. I'm in a church doing all the things. I'm on the choir. I'm a greeter. I'm on the women's ministry. I'm doing all the things. I'm busy. I'm a great mom. I'm a great mom who suffers with major depression. Well, they called it severe clinical chronic depression back then. But I was in 2 mental facilities. I have tried, well, I've been on different medications, Lexapro, all these different medications for depression, and nothing worked for me. So I don't want to stay in all the bad, but there was so much darkness. And if I can overcome and find a light switch, if Jan can overcome, anyone can. That is always going to be my message, no matter what. It doesn't mean that life becomes perfect. It doesn't mean that you don't have regular, everyday issues. But the fact that I can sit here and know that no matter what comes or what goes, I'm married. We've been married 11 years now. My daughter is amazing. She's 30 years old. As Jan stated, I'm a Mimi of 3 gorgeous little boys. I am a mother-in-law, and my son loves me. My son-in-law loves me. I love him. All these things are great, but life is still not perfect because it is a process. But I'm hopeful. I'm continually hopeful because as long as I can breathe, as long as there's breath in me, I have an opportunity to have new experiences, to share with someone, to impact someone, to have new a new opportunity at life. And although when I was 30 and that was my final suicide attempt, I have not attempted again for 21 years, which is a huge blessing because I was walking around plagued with thoughts of suicide for 18 years, from the time that I was 12 to 30 years old. And in the church, doing all the things, praying, trying to pray it away. God, please take the depression. Please remove it. But going to church and everything's great because you didn't talk about depression, especially in the Black church. You didn't talk about depression, especially in a Black family. And I don't want to make this about race, but I would be disingenuous to show up as a Black woman and not address that, right? And a Black Christian woman on top of that. The church tells you pray it away. If you're depressed, that's a demon. It's a spirit. Come get hands laid on you. Because I was going to this, it was a non-denominational, but it really mirrored a Pentecostal type of church. Pray, get in the line for healing, deliverance, and all the things. And I'd go home and what am I not doing again? Now, I didn't tell the pastor because it was something you were supposed to be ashamed of, because you're not doing something. You're not praying enough. You're not studying enough. What are you not fast? Because some of these go not except by fasting and praying. So you gotta, to get rid of this one, you better fast. Well, did you fast? Well, get up in the morning and praise and worship. And I'm doing all the things, and yet I was still hopeless. When I attempted suicide the last time I was a Christian visiting a church.
And I think it's really remarkable for you to be so honest and forthright, because you are still you still believe, you have beliefs that are very strong, but you also can speak the truth of how some belief systems or a religious abuse happens, in saying that it's enough to just fast and pray and everything will be fine and you'll get the miracle. Well, not everybody gets the miracle. Some people's children die when you fast and pray or whatever.
Sometimes the miracle is
Yes,
therapy.
that's the miracle. So let's get ourselves to therapy. Yes. Let's figure out those things. Let's talk about this stuff. People don't talk about it because they either feel ashamed, like I wasn't worthy enough. I didn't pray enough. I didn't fast enough. I didn't do enough. And that all that does is just continue the depression cycle downward, downward, downward to apathy, depression, hopelessness, and let's just forget it, which is what you tried to do.
Because it's something else that I'm not doing well or right.
Enough of those.
Like I wasn't the good daughter who deserved love, who deserved protection. I didn't do that well. I wasn't the good niece who deserved protection, right? I deserved molestation. I deserved rape by my father. I deserved rejection from my mother. I deserved physical violence from my aunt. I deserve these things because I wasn't good enough. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't worthy enough. I wasn't a Christian enough. I just wasn't enough until finally, after that last attempt, and I dove in head first. Now, my way of healing is a little different than most because I was prescribed Lexapro after that last attempt. My doctor, they actually reached out to my MD, my primary care, my PCP physician, and I had a good relationship with him. When he got the report, he actually called me. They had scheduled an appointment, but he called me before my appointment. Like, I need you to come into the office as soon as you're released from there. I said, you called me at home. I have been released. He was so confused by everything. He's like, why did I get a report that you've attempted suicide? He had never known my history, right? So he was actually, I didn't see a psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist. I would go to my primary care physician and he would just listen to me. This man gave me his phone number at home and told me if I ever had another thought to call him. And he didn't care what time of day or night. This is the importance of community. And you might find community anywhere. This was my doctor, an MD.
Thank God.
And that was the beginning for me. Someone validating me, listening to me, telling me they're sorry that I had to endure such horrific experiences, tears in his eyes.
Empathy.
I mean, this man I'm sorry?
Empathy is one of the main pieces
Absolutely.
that has to exist for a survivor to begin to feel validated, acknowledged, and like there's care in the world. Somebody, not in your immediate
Yes.
family, but somebody cares. And that empathy is the doorway in. So if you want to help somebody in your own life, listen with empathy. Listen. Don't try to fix them. Listen with empathy.
Yes. Without judgment,
Really.
without suggestions of, well, if it were me, I would. Just listen. And if it's a horrific story, something they've experienced, you have no idea how much this man's saying he was sorry that I endured such horrific experiences. Hearing that removed some of the chains. And then that was the pathway, that was the gateway for me to hear a little clearer from God. That began the journey of I'm praying, but not in this mystical, Lord, send me a miracle type of prayer, but God, I need your help. What should I do? How do I start? And when I tell you it wasn't this voice that cracked open the clouds, but it was the still small voice inside of Michelle, which was the voice of God that said, research every scripture that talks about your purpose and who I see you as. So I literally, I still have this little A through Z. I can't remember what it's called, but if you need hope, if you need this, if you need love, if you need encouragement, that kind of little book for the Bible, because this is before the internet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, look it up.
This
It's
is
in
before the
John,
internet.
or it's over here in Acts, or over here in, First Corinthians. We can tell you that it's all about love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So I started looking up scriptures about, when God created us, what was his intention? What does he think about me? And I would jot down every scripture that talks about you're the head and not the tail, above only and not beneath. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. And instead of for God so loved the world, I was led to say, for God so loved Michelle, that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. Life, not death, not depression, not anxiety, not hopelessness, but life. Life. I came that you may have life, and that life more abundantly. Abundant life is not despair. And when I started writing these things down, I had to write, and I kept writing them, and I would speak them out of my mouth. That was the beginning of my healing, reframing, reshaping, restating, talking to Michelle, because so many negative things had been deposited into Michelle, so many negative words, so many negative acts. I was telling Jan this earlier, I had to speak to myself in the mirror out loud, okay, audibly. You are more than a conqueror. You can do all things through Christ Jesus who strengthens you. God loves you. You are special. You are the called according to purpose. You are not the tail. You are the head. God sees you and he smiles. You are worthy. You are justified because you're here, because he created you. You have a purpose because you have breath. You are not waste. You are not damaged goods. You are beautifully, fearfully, and wonderfully made. And every time looking in the mirror, tears coming down my eyes because I didn't believe it. But every single day, it seems like for years, but it was at least for a year to a year and a half. Every time the enemy in my head, the enemy of my past, the enemy of the rape and the molestation and the rejection, every time those words came up, you're nothing, you might as well give up. No, I'm fearfully and I have a purpose. You're lying. That is not the truth of who I am. People need me. My daughter loves me. I am loved. Getting married. My husband loves me. My friends love me. I don't have many, but I have two really good friends. I am loved. I am necessary. And that was my beginning. And in the book, I talk about transformed thoughts as if it's the last thing, but it was actually the first thing. It started really with me transforming my thoughts, and then forgiveness. So the flip is forgiveness, love, purpose, and transform thoughts. The forgiveness piece, that is hard when you have been victimized. That is so insurmountable. When someone has hurt you, devastated you, removed your power, removed your safety, it is so difficult. And I will speak for Michelle. It was necessary for me. Forgiveness doesn't mean that I gave them a pass and, oh, what they did wasn't wrong. No, forgiveness means that I don't have to revisit what they did and hate them, despise them. It literally means I accept what happened. Because, see, in not accepting it, I suppressed it. And I compartmentalized. So I didn't deal with anything until I was well past 30, and it was killing me. But not only did I have to forgive them, I had to forgive God. I said it. I had to forgive God because I felt like, how did you let this happen? Until I realized he allowed it. He didn't do it. But the people who were the caretakers over me as a child, they should have done better. So if I can forgive them, I can forgive him. And then the big one, I had to forgive Michelle, especially as it related to my father, because I blame myself for putting me in that position because he told me what he was going to do when I was 14. And at 16, he actually did it. Why didn't I stop him? And I forgave me because I did the best I could with a 14-year-old brain, and a 14-year-old brain who had arrested development because she'd already been molested at 9.
And 6 was, I mean, you know, you go back and you go, well, yeah, you didn't have a shot. You didn't have a chance. And that's the thing. I look at you and I'm like, hallelujah, I want to go to Michelle's church. That's all I can say. When you start this, I'll be your first congregant in the Church of Michelle. I love it. I'm serious. This is the kind of story and you as a person that can move mountains, because the mountain is that person who has no hope and is like in despair and goes, there's nothing for me. And then they hear your story and they go, okay, now what did you do? Okay, at 31, you know, or 30, whatever, when the last suicide attempt, and it hasn't happened for 21 years, and you started on your writing, which became your book, Flipped, FLPT, forgiveness and then love. Okay, so we've kind of talked about those two. Keep going with us, because you were saying your thoughts, the T for how you transformed your thoughts really came first. And I really believe that that is the key. You have to start making yourself think differently, even if you don't believe it. And you did that by looking in a mirror and physically out loud stating those things that you just said. If we could leave one tip for people listening, get a mirror and out loud start saying everything that you don't believe about yourself.
Yes.
And reframe it.
The reality is that words are vibration, right? When you're a child and people speak affirmations and they, you know, validate you, they see you, and they speak positive words over you, and they tell you you're amazing, you're so smart, you're so this, you're so that. Imagine that child and the polar opposite. Another child, you know, with the parents that say, you can't do anything, you're an idiot, you're this, you're that. And imagine the difference in the two as they become adults. There will be a difference because those words, they become seeds, and seeds reap a harvest. They create something, right? You sow a seed, you water it, and they keep hearing these negative things or positive things. Eventually, that thing is going to grow. It becomes a part of that person. Words are vibration. So if someone else can speak words into you that frame and change the life that you'll have, how much more can your own words frame and change the direction or the trajectory of your life? I speak the words. They exit my lips. And when I tell you, I've talked about this so much, and when I'm sharing, if it's on a stage, if it's on a phone call, it doesn't matter, on a Zoom, speak it audibly out of your mouth. Don't just think it. Thoughts are great, but words, God even created. Why did God? He is the omnipotent, the all powerful. Why did he have to speak words? He said, let there be. That was the
Right.
beginning. He didn't just think it, presto change, blink, and it's the worlds
Yeah.
were formed. No, he said, let there be, and there was light. Let there be, and there was water. There was the sea. There was the earth. He spoke words. Now, he's the greatest
Right.
creator, and I'm not trying to push religion on anyone. This is my
Right.
belief. But if the greatest creator has to speak words, how much more do we have to speak what we want to see in our lives? So I speak it, those words in the mirror. I'm not believing it, but eventually those words are bouncing all around the room as I speak them, and they have nowhere else to go except me. So I speak it
Yep.
out. I'm looking at myself. I'm not. Yes, you are. You can do all things through Christ. I'm speaking it. It's bouncing around the room, and it goes right back and deposits into my heart until eventually that seed takes root and it begins to become my belief system. Now you can't tell me I'm not worthy. Do I have moments where I have to go back and do the same thing? Go back to my toolbox, Michelle. You're a little hesitant. You're a little fearful. You don't feel good enough. Okay, great. I know I have tools in my box. I know what I need to pull out to speak to myself. I still talk to myself, not as much, but I do still talk to myself because everyone will have times where they hesitate and they're unsure and fear will pop up, but I don't let it paralyze me. I take the fear with me. Right? Are you good enough for this? Are you worthy? Yes, I am. Why not? Why wouldn't I be? So we have forgiveness. I had to forgive everyone, myself, them, God. Love. I didn't love me because I didn't receive love. That's pretty
Yeah.
easy,
And you
right?
got to
So
experience.
once I forgave, the love gates started coming, flooding. The flood started. Okay, now I can receive God's love. Now I can receive all these other. Oh, I can receive love from myself because I've spoken so much, right? The transformed thoughts. So I've forgiven. Here comes the love. And now purpose. Oh, I've forgiven. I love me now. My thoughts have changed. I'm worthy of something good. Wait, there's a purpose for this. Now, before I continue, one of the mistakes that individuals who are believers, one of the things that they say often when a person comes to them and tells them a sad story or a story about trauma or tragedy, it's like, oh, well, if someone dies, oh, well, God needed to do that because of this. That was God's will and God this. And listen, God does not need to have you become a victim. He does not need to victimize you to teach you anything. That is not of God. The assailant is not of God. Actually, death isn't either, but we're not going to go there. But that is not of God. It is not of God for you to be unprotected, for you to be victimized, for an assailant to come and remove your safety and your purpose and your love for yourself. It is not of God. People make bad choices. Now, God can use it, right? Right now, God is using everything that everyone, including Michelle, did to harm me. He's using that, I'm believing God, to help someone else. But God didn't have to allow me to be raped or suffer from depression or be molested or rejected or hurt or anything else, abused. He didn't do that. It happened. He saw it, but he also said, Michelle, I can help you to use that for your good once you heal or even in the middle of your healing. And just there, I want to assure someone out there, if you're listening, no matter what stage you're in, when you get the revelation that you have worth and value beyond your experiences, beyond your trauma, I don't care at what stage you're in. I don't care if it's the beginning of your healing. If you are exposed to someone who's dealing with something that you've dealt with and you've kind of mastered, or you kind of got the revelation on how to help them, speak it into their lives. You have value. No matter where you are, we are all somewhere in the process of healing. No one has truly arrived, and you are just as valuable as anyone else.
Absolutely. And that's really, I think, when you talk with the purpose, I believe that just finding your own purpose, whether it comes out of the trauma that you have survived and that you now feel that your purpose is to share your story and to give others the
Mm-hmm.
strength to share theirs, or the permission to open their mouths
Mm-hmm.
and their, raise their voices and come together as advocates and activists and do the things that we do. I think every individual is different. Some people have terrible trauma stories and they don't have the same personalities or the same kind of support, or they
Mm-hmm.
don't find that to be their thing, but it'll be something else. I think people in general just need to find purpose, and for many people, it's going to look different, and that's okay. That's perfect. We're all different. And so not trying to put yourself into one box, but being open to what might the purpose be. What am I drawn to, right?
Yes. And Jan, even if it doesn't have to be on a stage,
Right.
on a platform. If that is, you come across another person who's experiencing, they've experienced trauma, listening. That could be your purpose in that moment. See, I don't believe, even though I don't go into this in the book, but I don't believe purpose is one
Right.
thing. I don't believe that, if you're a singer or an actress, that's all you're here for. Because what happens if you can't act
Right.
anymore? What happens if you can no longer be the CEO of the company? Do you no longer have purpose? No, we all have purpose every single day. But for me, I felt valueless. So understanding that my purpose, I am a thermometer. I'm not a I'm sorry. I am a thermostat. I'm not a thermometer. A thermometer merely takes the temperature and it reports the temperature out. A thermostat changes the temperature. A thermostat goes into an environment that is hopeless and says, hey, I've got some hope for you. I don't care if it's just that I acknowledge you, I see you, and I say, oh my gosh, you look beautiful today. That might give someone hope in the room. A thermometer goes into an environment and changes it, changes the temperature. My purpose is literally to bring light, love, and salt,
Mm.
and to serve. And I do that everywhere I go. Whether it's a corporate job, light, love, salt, and service. No matter where I go, that's what I'm doing. Sitting here right now, that's what I'm doing. On a stage, that's what I'm doing. That's the root. So if I could never be on a stage again, if I was never on another podcast, if I had to work just a desk job, not just, that's a beautiful thing, but if I had a desk job, same thing, light, love, salt, and service everywhere I go. My purpose with my daughter, light, love, salt,
Tell me about
service.
salt.
It is, okay, why do you use salt in your
It gives it
food?
flavor.
Exactly.
Love it.
Bring your flavor in the world. Spice it up. When people are down, sometimes they need your energy. That's the new, trendy word. Energy, energy, energy. But bringing that energy, people are hurting. They need the spark. They need the flavor. They need you to come in and shift their perspective a little bit. If it's merely, it's an environment and everyone's busy and everyone's tired and they're stressed out and they're in this and they're in that, and you come in and you say, good morning, ladies. How is everyone? I hope you're having a great weekend. That's adding flavor to that flavorless
Right, to the
environment.
mundane of, I mean, that's beautiful.
Yes.
And it's also personal. I love that too. What's your favorite spice?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just
Mm-hmm.
spice it up
Exactly.
your way, as
Yes. If you want to be oregano, be oregano.
exactly. I'm growing real fresh oregano in my
Oh,
pots on my porch. Oregano, basil, sweet
I
mint,
love
peppermint.
oregano.
I'm so proud of myself. My son got me all into this gardening thing. So
I
it's
love
been really
that.
fun
I
to see it
love that.
grow and smell and time.
Are you a planter? It sounds like
Yeah,
you
I
are.
love flowers. My father.
I mean, bigger than just
Yeah,
plants,
I
larger than plants, even with your
Yep,
foundation, a
absolutely.
planter.
And that's what I love too. I
Mm-hmm.
love to see people grow and progress and go to the next step and see and look back and go, oh wow, I really
Yes.
have made some huge, strides in life. And if we can inspire people to start that healing journey a little sooner, a little faster, because I
Mm-hmm.
think what happens
Yeah.
is you so want to forget everything, you just start to move on. You just go,
Mhm.
I'm moving on
Mhm.
and I'm just going to forget
Mhm.
about it because it was so hard. And that's basically what, and even if the person that was harmed um, doesn't do that, it feels like the rest of the world around you wants you to do that. Like, oh, let's just move on.
Get
Let's just
over
not
it.
think about it. Let's just move on. And really, what is important is to be able to well, of course, to report, which doesn't happen so much of the time because people don't feel like they're going to be
Mhm.
believed, or too much time has gone by or whatever reason, or they're too scared. But if we can get to the place where we know that we're worth it faster,
Yeah.
so that we can get into some kind of safe environment for healing, whether it's an online community or it's like what we
Mhm.
do with Thrivivors, or if it's like going to, like you said, you went to church, and in that you were doing all the right things, but you had to get yourself
Mhm.
in front of a mirror and get it
Yes.
reframed in yourself. It wasn't just going to magically
Yes.
happen. You had to do work.
Exactly.
And if we could just start the work a
Mhm.
little sooner, that's what I'm always saying. I wish I could get the 20 something year olds, but honestly,
Yeah.
they're kind of going to be the ones I think to really prevent the abuse because they are talking, they have those, you
Yes.
know, crazy amounts of communication and information on
Mhm.
those phones. It can be a detriment on some ways for their mental health, but it can
Mhm.
also be like, we got people that will support you. We know what the words are. We know what's happening. We are not going to take it anymore. It's like that. And that's why I believe in our young people that, like those, have you seen on the news lately those two teenagers in school doing this whole thing on gun violence, and they've rallied millions of teenagers across the whole United States.
Oh
One was a
wow.
Sandy Hook. She was in
Mhm.
school in Sandy Hook when that gunman, whatever person, kid.
Yeah.
Anyway, and just to hear them talk, I'm like, that's what needs to happen in the world of childhood, sexual violence. Those kids
I
have to get
absolutely
together and go,
agree.
we're not taking this anymore, and we're going to teach our
Exactly.
younger brothers and sisters that isn't okay, and we're going to stand up for you, and we're going to make this stop. I really think that that is one of the biggest answers and the biggest reasons why we've been given this kind of mass communication model.
Mhm.
Can do so much damage, it could do so much good. Let's use it for the
I
right.
absolutely agree. And I think we have to also, being the seasoned
Yes, with the
individuals,
adults.
that we let them know, that we communicate. And just to reiterate what Jan said, we have to do the
Mhm.
work. And it doesn't seem fair that after something that special and important has been taken from you, that you would be left with the responsibility to do the work. It doesn't seem
Right.
fair. It's not. It's not fair, but it is necessary. We have to do the work. Once that has happened to us, once we've been victimized, we have to do the work because we are worthy of wholeness, of healing, of a second, third, fourth, fifth, 20th, 100th
Mhm.
chance. We are worthy. We are valuable. We're not damaged goods. We have a purpose. So we have to do the work. And the only way, I know this is going to sound like a cliche, but the only way over, because I remember my aunt telling me, you act like you're the only person in the world that something bad has happened to. I said, no, I actually act like what happened to me actually happened to
Yeah.
me. And this is after I'd started facing it, because again, I'd suppressed it for so long and I was in survival mode, making horrible decisions in my life and horrible mistakes and all the things. But the only way over that, get over it, which it's
Right.
impossible to do, but the only way over is through. You have to go through it. You have to face it. You have to acknowledge it. You have to accept it. And acceptance sounds like such a horrible word. But if you don't accept it, you will likely suppress it. And if you suppress damaged toxicity, you're only going to poison yourself.
Slowly.
And that's what I was
Yeah.
doing. I was suppressing and I was in survival mode. And if you know anything about survival mode, it causes you to not be able to see clearly. You're always feeling like you're in desperation. So you make horrible choices,
Mhm.
right? And I did that for a very long time, a very long time. Now I no longer beat myself up about it. I did the best that I could with what I had.
Yeah. Oh my word. That's just such a beautiful thought for anyone who wants to get on their healing path, on their transformational breakthroughs in their thoughts. I definitely want to thank you for your honesty, for your vulnerability, and I too am so sorry for what you went through. And I am so grateful that you're here to tell the tale and to continue to finish the story in such a magnificent way, to write it. You are the creator that is writing and rewriting and reframing what almost took you out.
Thank you, Jan. This is so healing to me. I am so sorry for what you went through. Um, I am amazed and thankful to be here, experiencing life and this moment with you, especially after seeing you on television. And not just your story, but I saw you on Criminal Minds and loved you. Okay. I love Criminal Minds.
Wow, that one episode. It was a cool episode. Talk about a full circle moment for me, because that episode I played the mother of a kidnapped missing child.
I know.
I'm like,
I know.
that casting director didn't know my story. My story wasn't out yet.
Hello.
I mean, not like that.
Hello.
I talked about it, but
Yeah,
certainly not
I
in
know.
LA. Certainly didn't have a documentary. I mean, it was so weird that I got cast like that. And it was like this full circle moment of going, oh my gosh, to come back, to have this child come back into your life. They've been brainwashed. You don't know how to approach them. That was really a full circle moment. And had a great
Seriously, when I
experience on
saw
it.
that, because I remembered you from Criminal Minds, and then I saw your documentary, I'm like, wait. What? I thought maybe they did know, and that's why you took the part. But the bottom line, I'm sorry you went through that, but I'm so thankful that you are using every bit of what you've gone through to make your impact in the world and to help others heal, or at least point them in the direction of their healing. I'm thankful for the time. I appreciate you. I'm here, period. That's just, I'll leave it there. I'm here, and I'm truly thankful to share space in this world with you. I appreciate it.
You're just a light, and you are the room at the end of the whatever, the dark tunnel. And you're like, no, I didn't have a tunnel, but there was definitely illumination. I'm like, well, you just shared it with us today. You illuminated us in a way that I just cannot thank you enough. Thank you so much, Michelle, for being who you are. And I'm sure that we will have a future conversation. And it's been really wonderful to associate with you just in this brief little period of time. And I want it to go lifelong. Thank you.
So do I. Thank you, Jan.